by transferring evidence-based knowledge, providing expert clinician consultation, providing training and education events. Also involved in developing website resources and supporting the Provincial Advisory Committee and the community of PSR practice.
The island part, I have a hard time.
Oh, it's be a downer. Be a downer. I'll just suck the energy out of it.
To let you know about an upcoming webinar. We're hoping that this will happen on March 27th at 10:30 in the morning, and it will be launching Canada's first edition of psychosocial rehabilitation competencies. So I think you'll agree that this is an important piece of work for us, and we are grateful to our partners in Ontario for sharing this information with us. The cost, as ever, will be free, and we will have, again, about 190 participants. Please do remember that this will be open to everybody across Canada, so of course it will be first served. First come, first served, and we look forward to having you. We'd like to take a moment to just do a poll, just in order to have a better sense of what times of the day and what days are most suitable for you to participate in webinars. So please, if you can take a moment and just click on the days and the times that might be most easy for you to participate. This way, we're hoping that each time we will get a full participation. So please take a moment and make your preferences. Thank you. Am I allowed to say that? No, you're not. Right. So everybody has made their choices. So we will just keep that information, and Matt and I will store it away, and we'll be able to design the times and the dates of the webinars accordingly. So thanks very much for your participation in that. Okay. This is just a little bit of a visual screen to help you just navigate your way through what you're seeing. It may be new for you as it is for us. So the first is just to enable your microphone. When it's green, you'll know that it's working. Please do accept the flash warning if it pops up. To raise your hand, you'll see a small icon on the right. And again, once that little icon that looks like a hand up is green, that will enable you to speak. You can also adjust the volume of the mic by pressing the icon, as noted beside the red arrows. Sometimes the volume may be higher on your side than it is on ours, so that gives you some control. So that leads us to my great pleasure of introducing Kathy Wong, occupational therapist that some of you will know. She has extensive history working with adolescents and young adults who experience concussion, in addition to working with people who live with mental health and substance abuse issues. She's an experienced speaker in the area of cognitive rehabilitation and a long-standing member of the Cognition group at Vancouver Coastal Health, who produced guidelines for practitioners. Kathy is also an instructor with the University of British Columbia in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy, and also teaches with the Physiotherapy Department. So please join me in wishing Kathy a warm welcome, and we look forward to Kathy's presentation. So please just give us a moment to pull up the slides.
Hi, I've never done this before. In fact, when I was a student with Trudy Beaton, who I understand is in the audience, we just had typewriters. So definitely would like to thank Matt for this, the technology piece. So first of all, before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the pioneers in cognitive rehabilitation, and these individuals are Fred Ott and Laura Fulton, Colleen McCain, Kristen Legrand, as well as fellow members of the cognitive practice group, Stacey Kalmick, Marie Schaaf, and Julia Healy, who I understand are in the audience. And a special thank you to Kim Calciferri, who has been such a huge support to occupational therapists. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about, oh, someone's raising their hand. Oh, okay, sorry, never done this. Okay, I'll just keep going. So I'm going to talk to you about cognitive rehabilitation and community mental health. And this is a lecture that I give to UBC students. Oops, trying to advance the slides here. Is it down here? So what I'd like to cover is explaining what is cognitive rehabilitation, its effectiveness with individuals with severe mental illness, how we integrate mindfulness into cognitive rehabilitation, and then talking about brain health and some strategies that are helpful for memory. The outline, we'll talk about mental health and cognition, the rationale, research, mindfulness, and I'd like to discuss a curriculum that was just developed with the cognitive practice group, and it came out last year. And then we're going to do a case study. Sure. So we'll just have a little intermission here.
Technical checking here. Sorry, guys. Some people have good sound, and some folks, their sound isn't quite as good. So we'll try that. Hopefully that makes a difference as well.
Regina, you can share this. Oh, no. Okay. Nobody wants to look at their face in here. Okay. So let me talk about, first of all, what is the etiology of schizophrenia? And what they have found is that there's some abnormalities in the actual neural circuits, the neural pathways that connect the frontal lobe to the other parts of the brain. And it's quite complex. They don't know the exact cause, but they know it's a combination of genetics, neural development, and other social areas. What's really cool is that there's a project called the Human Connectome Project, and they're mapping out healthy brains using MEGs and MRIs just to see what is the whole circuitry of the human brain. And from there, they can find out what happens when people have, for instance, schizophrenia or other conditions. So just like to, oops, advance the slide. Okay, thanks. Okay, just like to talk about normal adolescent brain development, starting with the top that's at 5 years of age to 20 years. And these are MRI scans that were done just a few years ago. So what you'll notice is that there's a gradual loss of gray matter, and the gray matter is the basically when a person is first born, you're developing from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And the front of the brain really doesn't get developed until you're about 22 for girls and 25 for boys. Sorry, Matt. And so I'm just going to go into the next one. Okay. So if you look here on the left side, in terms of brain changes, it's normal adolescents, boys and girls. And then with individuals with schizophrenia, they actually lose their gray matter earlier than those that don't have it. There was a really interesting TED Talks done just last year by Dr. Thomas Insel, and he's the director of the National Institute of Mental Health. And his question was, why do we consider people with severe mental illness as having a mental disorder or behavioral disorder? Why don't we consider it as a brain disorder? What he showed was, and it's the same as the slides that you just saw earlier with the brain scans, is the top part of the graph shows normal development, a normal trajectory for human development. And then individuals with schizophrenia, you see that the changes in the brain occur earlier, at an earlier age. What he's explaining is that quite often people with schizophrenia are not diagnosed with that until they start showing symptoms such as delusions and hallucinations. But by then, the brain changes have happened a lot earlier. So you're not really doing earlier intervention because you're not getting an early diagnosis. He said it's the same thing as with people with heart disease. If we waited till someone had a heart attack, you would be losing 1.1 million people in the US every year. So why can't we spend as much on research with people with mental illness? So mental illness equals brain illness. This is a slide by the Vancouver Coastal Health clinical resource therapist, Kristen Legrand, who's on mat leave. She and I did this presentation at the National OT conference in June. Essentially, if we look at brain injury and mental illness, they are two different conditions, but what's common is that there are cognitive impairments. And so in people with schizophrenia, the cognitive impairments are what can cause it difficult, can disrupt adolescence and adulthood in terms of attaining the ability to live independently, to take care of yourself, to have relationships. And it doesn't matter what clinical state, if the meds are working in terms of decreasing the positive symptoms, cognitive impairment is still there and it persists. And cognitive impairment is also seen in people with mood disorders and bipolar disorder. So the specific cognitive deficits that are seen, the difficulties, and this is not hierarchical, so it's being able to focus and pay attention, for instance, to this webinar, and I have apparently 80 PowerPoints, and I'm hoping I'm not going to do death by PowerPoints to all of you. We'll try to speak quickly. Learning and memory, verbal memory, working memory, information processing speed, executive functioning, which is basically the boss of your brain in terms of making decisions and judgments, and then social cognition, which is being able to recognize social cues, being able to monitor your own emotions, and to engage in social relationships. So Dr. Vinogradov is a neuroscientist in San Francisco, and she has basically done a lot of cognitive remediation clinical trials. And basically, she looked at people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder. And if you look across at this table at the different cognitive challenges, they vary, but memory is sort of common with all of them. But if you look at the functional outcome, they all predict that people are going to have difficulties with vocation, especially with vocation. In fact, that's what most of the clinical trials have been, is looking at vocational outcomes. Oops, we were supposed to ask a question. Okay. We were going to ask you a question of what do you think is the strongest predictor of functional outcome, but obviously the answer is there. But let's see who was paying attention. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah. Well, no, Matt's gonna.
Oh, Matt's gonna do his thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, what is the strongest predictor for functional outcome? If you could just tick, that would be great on your screen. What's happening, Matt? Okay.
Yep, 98% to 2%.
Okay. So the answer is cognitive impairment. So well done, everybody. Oh, sorry. Just need a moment. Okay, Matt, go ahead. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so obviously everyone was paying attention, even though it's 3 o'clock. So cognitive rehabilitation, what is the definition? Cognitive rehabilitation is it's quite well known in the field of physical health, especially with the area of brain injury. And we divide it up into cognitive remediation and then compensatory approaches. Okay. So Kit Malia is a cognitive specialist in Britain who's done a lot of work with both civilians and soldiers who come back from the wars in Britain with mild traumatic brain injury. And so a lot of his work has been looking at cog rehab for individuals who have challenges in attention and memory information processing speed. And his model is that first people have to have insight into their areas of difficulty. They need to know how the brain works. And then process training, which is either, for instance, attention process training that psychologists can use with people with brain injuries. Or there's also strategy training, which is a lot of what therapists and clinicians do. So teaching compensatory strategies, if you're having difficulty with, for instance, remembering where things are or remembering your appointments. And then there's also the functional activities of training. So you've got the process training, you have specific strategy training, and then you have to make sure that that gets transferred into everyday life. Otherwise, all of this other stuff is just not useful. Now, there's a cognitive remediation experts working group that meets every 2 years. In 2010, this is a slide from Kristen, they defined cognitive remediation as a behavioral training program to improve cognitive processes. So they didn't really look at functional outcomes. And then 2 years ago, what was really cool was that they talked about that it's a learning process and that we need to improve functional outcomes. So research, there's been over 30 years of research in terms of cognitive remediation, but it's only in the last few years what I call it emerging research in terms of seeing some positive outcomes with cognitive remediation. So meta-analyses where they look at studies, very similar studies, and they pull together the outcomes and looking at the effects of cognitive remediation. Wykes in 2011 had 40 studies. We're just going to take a look at that. She looked at 40 studies where about half were individuals who were inpatients, half were outpatients. And then there were 31 studies with individual remediation, and then there were also group treatments. So the outcomes looked at were cognition, the actual symptoms, and then functioning. And if you look at the left side, the higher the number, the greater the effect, which is something that we're looking for. And if it's just cognitive remediation, there was progress, but it's quite a small effect. When it was included with psychosocial rehab, the effect increased. But when it was included adjunctively with psychosocial rehab and strategy training, the effect more than doubled. So I think what's really important to recognize is that you can't do cognitive remediation on its own. It basically takes a team. And I especially want to acknowledge people working in the vocational area, such as the IPS workers, people doing the employment programs at Coast and Open Door and the mental health teams, because it's that in combination with the strategy training and cognitive remediation that it would make a difference. There was also another recent study came out 2 years ago with outpatients with schizophrenia. And as you can tell, 12 weeks duration once a week, it's pretty time intensive and it's very expensive. So I'm not sure it's something that managers, to be honest, in our current fiscal climate would support. So if we look at the effect sizes here, again, if it's just pure cognitive remediation, you see there's a greater effect in that area. And what they would be doing to evaluate is neuropsychological testing, such as attention tests, the digit span test or trails test. But then all the other areas didn't improve. If it was functional skills training, for instance, teaching someone how to do their laundry, how to take the bus, well, they would improve that area, but they wouldn't improve in the other areas such as cognition, community activities, work skills. And then of course, when you combine all those areas together, you see the effect size is increasing a fair bit. Now, I know that there's someone, I think one person in the audience, Julia. Hi, Julia, who's with Hamper House. And I could only find a couple of studies where cognitive remediation was embedded into an education setting. Most of it's done with looking at vocational outcomes, but recently there was a study done in Toronto where they embedded cognitive remediation with a community college, and they got really good results. Students talked about how it helped with their studies and helped with their exams. Okay, so what are the inclusion criteria? Basically, it's somebody who has to have at least a 4th grade education level, reading level, can't be actively using alcohol or drugs, no traumatic brain injury within the past 3 years, and being able to manage being in a group situation. Now, the reality is we've had people in some of our COG rehab groups who have had concussions within the last year or two, and they have managed well. So really, it's an individual thing. And you know, when you have your orientation with your clients, that's when you can see whether this would be a good match for them. This is something they would be interested in. And then in terms of what exactly is cognitive remediation, in the old days, when I first graduated, it was paper and pencil tests. But you really can't standardize that. You can't. And it's exhausting if you're constantly doing paper pencil tests. So now it's computerized drill and practice tests. And these are the more popular programs. The ones with the red arrows, cognitive enhancement therapy, that looks at social cognition. And Carolyn Desmarais from the EPI, Early Psychosis Intervention Program, and myself are going to start this program. We've received funding. Thank you, Regina, for accepting our our funding request. This has been done in the States. I don't think it's been done in Canada yet, and we'll be doing it with young individuals with schizophrenia from 19 to 30 years of age. Posit Science is a program that a number of mental health teams, well, a couple of mental health teams in GVS, Gastrovocational Services, have. I have to say, Posit Science has not been highly motivating for our clients. It looks at basic auditory and visual sensory processing, and that's because Dr. Vinay Gradav, that neuroscientist, had thought that many people with schizophrenia have difficulties with that early processing area, and so she's doing it from a bottom-up approach, but the problem is it's just really not very motivating, especially with clients who are used to going on the internet and looking at much more motivating programs. So from the client perspective, psychosocial rehab and recovery is recognized as the gold standard for mental health treatment, and that the clinician is the coach, and that it's a collaboration. So this was from Dr. Mary Jansen, and this is hopefully the approach that's used with cognitive rehab. Why are we doing this cognitive intervention? We did a needs assessment in 2010, looking at all the different areas that clients might be interested in, and mental health consumers and their families said that it was the cognitive issue was number 5 for recovery. I think stress management was number 1, and that's actually a cognitive strategy in itself. So cognitive behavior therapy is an evidence-based practice, I think, as most people know. Cognitive remediation, it's considered a promising practice, so there's still not enough research to support this practice, but definitely it's getting there. And then for cognitive remediation, it's looking at specific shaping, and we're looking at attention and memory and planning. And then we're looking at the monitoring of your own behavior, so that's sort of the metacognition. And as mentioned earlier, it's computer exercises. There is some drill and practice and problem-solving exercises, but there's definitely been less research on that. And then strategy coaching. I don't know anyone who's using the NEAR approach, but it's, and I think it's because of the financial outlay that would have to be provided, but it is highly rated. In fact, the person who sort of invented it is Dr. Alice Medaglia, who is the psychologist that does the, oh gosh, what is that paper that comes out? It's Cognition for Families and Consumers. I'm asking Regina here because I can't remember the document that I think everyone should have. It's free access, and it's fantastic. It lists what you can do, practically speaking, for family members and for consumers. But we can get a copy. Actually, we'll put it on the website. Sounds great. Okay. Social cognition. This is really interesting because a lot of people feel that this is more needed than, this should be dealt with first before the memory and the attention. Because if you don't have that ability to engage with people in a healthy way, that affects your self-esteem and affects your ability to go out and maybe go to school and look at work. So we take a look here. I don't know if you're on your screen. Here's someone that's been in the paper a lot lately. And I personally would need to have a hard time differentiating if he's happy or if he's sad and all those other things. So someone, I think we'd all have a cognitive bias in this case. But what they're finding is that people with schizophrenia quite often have they have a very strong confidence in their false beliefs and not a strong confidence in terms of what is the reality. And so this particular program, metacognitive training, that Dr. Todd Woodward from UBC, as well as his colleagues from around Europe, is working on is cognitive biases. This is amazing. Dr. Todd Woodward, who's also a wonderful soccer coach, because our kids all play soccer there, he developed this program as a group program, and it's been used primarily with inpatients, and I think maybe on tertiary care, looking at cognitive biases and what is the evidence to support this. Now, what's really interesting is, oh, I'm gonna go back. I go back again. Okay, what's really interesting is that he and his colleagues just came to our mental health team on last Wednesday to talk about looking at a randomized controlled trial looking in the community. And we've never had this available in the community. So I believe it's going to start at Grandview, oh gosh, and Midtown. And it's 3 arms. There's going to be individuals doing the metacognitive training modules, which are great fun and they're free. Go online and you should take a look at the modules. They're lots of fun. People doing CogPack, which is cognitive remediation. And then people who will be in the control group, which is essentially on the wait list. So this is going to be provided, and what's really lovely is that even if you don't get on into this research, they will still afterwards, after the research is done, these individuals on the wait list can still access the metacognitive training and the cognitive remediation. So, Regina's. It's lovely. Every once in a while, Regina has her thumb up, which is so supportive because it is weird talking into a computer. I feel like one of my teenage sons. Okay, so there are challenges for designing a cognitive remediation program. First of all, a lot of cognitive remediation software has been designed for kids with learning disabilities, older adults, people with fairly healthy brains. And with people who've had, for instance, schizophrenia for a long time, where there's, relapses and then recoveries and then relapses, there's changes in the brain. They're not sure what does that affect in terms of the ability to learn. I mean, we do believe that the brain can always learn, and we always tell our clients in our brain fitness groups that you can always grow a neuron no matter how old you are, but we just don't know by how much. And then I guess another thing is, like any other evidence-based practice, is that we need to have fidelity, meaning we need to deliver this program as design and research. And there's been cutbacks in mental health. I'm not sure if we're able to provide that kind of treatment, having clients come in 2 or 3 times a week, have that computer training. So far, from what I've seen, it's the only time it's been done according to fidelity is in research. So just in conclusion with cognitive remediation per se, it's cognitive stimulation plus one-to-one coaching from a therapist in a rehabilitation setting that seems to yield the best functional outcomes. But as I mentioned earlier, there still needs to be a lot more studies in terms of, does it really affect functional outcomes such as independent living, going to school on your own without accommodations, academic accommodations, and then the cost. The cost can be quite prohibitive. So hopefully in the future that will lessen. So I wonder if we just want to take a break right now. We're halfway through our slides.
See if there's any questions. Perhaps there are any questions that people might have. Maybe you can just type them in and we can have a look. I did see one person asking where are the modules. So I'm not sure, Kathy, if you can answer that now.
So sorry, are these the modules to do with metacognitive training?
I believe so. I think it said MCT modules, yes. Okay.
What I'll do is I'll get the address. I think they call it the Euro, am I right? And I'll give it to Matt. He's laughing here. And Matt, if you could place it on the website, that would be great.
Okay. So if anybody has any additional questions, please just type them in and we can take 1 or 2 more at this point. Let us know.
Julia Healy is typing.
Julia's got a question.
Julia is an OT at Hamper House.
And if you have a mic, you can raise your hand too. We'll just take another question or 2 at this point.
Can we get a copy of the slides?
Absolutely, Julia. We will post a copy of the slides on the website. And you see behind us, you'll see the address for the website. So it's PSY rehab.ca. Hopefully you can see my writing on the board there. But you'll definitely have a copy of the slides right there. So
Kim's got a question.
And Kim has a question.
Oh, Kim, I hope it's not a hard question.
Kim has a question. I don't see it though. Do you see?
No,
She's typing. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Multiple attendees are typing. Oh my word.
Oh my God, here we go.
So we'll just take one more question and we will pop in for questions at the end of the session as well.
Should we keep going?
So Kathy says, hi Kathy, I was wondering if you could speak more to the social cognition and if there are any specific programs or suggestions that you could recommend. Not sure if you want to address that now or if you want to do it at the end.
Okay. I have to be honest, one of my compensatory strategies, Sorry, now I'm too loud? Okay.
Regular voice.
Okay. I have to be honest, one of my compensatory strategies is to always write everything down. So I'm going to have to look at my notes. I haven't memorized everything. The social cognition, looking in particular, is the cognitive enhancement therapy. And what we could do is we could also, I wonder, Matt, if it's okay if we could post the research about that and then the different social cognition software that's available.
Absolutely.
Essentially, it would be with my colleague and I, we would be doing, and this is modified because we don't have the time, unfortunately, clinical time, is that we would have individuals come for 1 hour of computer time, social cognition, and they would be in partners. So that way they could work together on the computer, and then we would get together in a group and talk about sort of managing, being able to have a conversation with someone that you don't know, or being able to ask your case manager or your physician a question that can be kind of hard to ask. That's that sort of thing. I'm being very, very vague about it because we're still looking at the manual. It's a very thick manual that we just received. But the group does start in April. And actually, I would be happy if people have more questions. I could probably leave my email and then address that question better. Okay.
A comment from Kim.
Yeah, we just have one comment by Kim, and she's just mentioning that she's supportive of the fidelity model, that she's an advocate of the fidelity model. So that really means just implementing it as it was supposed to be, and that you're a strong advocate for that. So maybe we'll just hold the rest of the questions because I know we still have quite a volume of material to go through.
Okay.
And then we will come back if there are any unanswered questions at the end.
Okay.
How about that?
Maybe I'll just do a quick one, Tara, because I can see the slide here. It says, do you know of any pilot studies happening in Canada? I just pulled out one today of a study that happened in Toronto with mental health and addictions. It's the one where they embedded the cognitive remediation in the community college. And it was a small study of only 42 participants, but pretty good outcome. So what I could do again is with my email address, if you want to email me, I can give you the link for that. In terms of other pilot studies happening in Canada, just the one that Todd Woodward is doing, Gaston Vocational Services, I don't know, forget that. They've been doing studies on and off with Dr. Colleen Bremner, who is a psychologist at UBC, and this is, again, with young individuals doing cognitive remediation. So I believe it's a combination of EPI and GBS. And so the best person to chat with for that one would be Stephanie Bernstein or Carolyn Desmarais or Anne Banga. Okay, those are occupational therapists with Vancouver Coastal Health. And it was a college, George Brown. I think it was, Linda. Okay, I guess I should get started again. Okay. All right. Go on to our next slide. Okay. So now we're going to go to compensatory approaches, which I think what most therapists are familiar with. Errorless learning is the opposite from trial and error. Did I get that right? Trial and error. Okay. Errorless learning is basically breaking a task into small steps and then teaching the client each step. Just think of yourself when you were first learning to tie your shoes and how your parent or your teacher taught you, or how to drive a car. You weren't thrown onto the UBC highway right away. You started small, and the task is broken into very manageable pieces. So that errorless learning has been used a lot with students with learning disabilities. I personally find it works best for all of us. I think it's frustrating to do trial and error, for instance, with this computer. So teach a person how to use a computer, and look what it does. Okay. And again, it's been used across disciplines. Really, it's been strongly used in the educational field. And it is especially helpful for technical procedures, like using the computer, and new information as well. So the bottom line I want to focus on is that you have to do it in vivo and taught in the context where it will be used. Okay. For those of you who learned to remember taking driving lessons and the little simulator in high school 20 years ago, and how it really was not the same as being in a car. So context has to be real. Now, Dr. Don Billigan created the cognitive adaptation training. And this is fantastic. I think we should put this on the website too, Denny, because this psychologist is lovely. Like a lot of the other people who created these programs, they're extremely generous in sharing their information. And Kristen Legrand emailed her and Dr. Elizabeth Twomley asking them both for their cognitive rehab programs, and right away got a response. And so I think Dr. Elizabeth Twomley, I am pronouncing it correctly.
Hard to say.
It's on the list. And Dr. Veligan, I think we'll have that information as well, Matt. And this one, basically, therapists are trained to go into the home and to work with the client and family and to reorganize the home, to put the aids in place. And it's also based upon that client's level of impairment in terms of executive functioning, whether is it because the client is more apathetic or disinhibited. And if they're more apathetic, then more cues are used. If they're more disinhibited, then make it a less distracting environment. So compensatory strategies, this is kind of my favorite area. Before we even teach compensatory strategies, you need to look at the client's insight into the difficulties. And just think about yourself. For instance, I always thought that, oh, sure, I know how to use a PC. And the truth was, no, I'm actually a Mac user. So I look for anybody in the room who's under 30, as I was telling Matt, for help. I need help here. Assessing the client's individual strengths and weaknesses, and what is their learning style, their learning preference. The slides seems to be sliding down a little bit. So that's a combination. Someone who does a wonderful job with this, with people with brain injury, is Alison McLean. She's an OT, was also an instructor at UBC, and has done lots of work with individuals with brain injury. And so she's also a good resource. She's with Vancouver Coastal Health. So let's look at the low-tech ones first, because quite of the high-tech ones are very expensive. So low-tech ones, we try to normalize this with everybody. I think a lot of us use day planners, calendars, school agendas. Well, to be honest, I don't think a lot of teenagers do use their school agendas, but they are there, a whiteboard. And so I want to ask you in the audience, which do you think is the most commonly used compensatory strategy that's low tech in this list here?
We have a poll coming up.
Okay. I didn't actually. Oh, sorry. No, I did. Thank you, Matt.
You good?
Yeah, this is perfect. So we're going to use this twice, okay?
Sure.
Okay. Which is the most commonly one used? I should have done that too.
Sure.
Okay.
Let folks have
Okay.
a minute to respond. We got about not even half.
Okay. Okay, so a lot of people are saying day planner, post-it notes. Okay. Do you know what? Post-it notes. So I wish I'd bought shares in 3M 30 years ago. But post-it notes, they're the least expensive, but they're the most commonly used. I think they even did a survey for people with brain injury many years ago. I remember going to a conference and they talked about how post-it notes were the most commonly used strategy. Okay. Great. Okay, now for the high tech. And this is fine, especially with my clients that are, who are adolescents or young adults, is thank God for the cell phone and watches with alarms. These are some apps. I know that I was talking to some therapists with the Community Link program. They said that the EEBA, the Easy Envelope Budget Aid, was really popular with their clients. AnyDo is a great app because you can look at things, you can look at a schedule of what you need to do today, tomorrow, or what you should have done yesterday. My homework, I've used it with adolescents. There's there's just so many apps. I didn't want to list them all, but these are the ones in particular that I found quite useful. Okay, sorry, okay. Okay, and then so those are the external and internal. Sorry, sorry about this, but I feel like we've skipped a couple of slides. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so the next one, thanks. Thanks, Regina. Okay, so we talked about the external strategies, the strategies. Okay. Okay. Sorry, we're just having some technical difficulties. The slides are moving on their own. There must be a spirit in this library. Okay, so this is for internal memory, and I think if I had practiced this presentation a lot, I wouldn't have to use my notes. So practice, practice, practice. Every time you overlearn something, you can solve the data a lot better. Chunking information, there's a reason why the telephone number doesn't have 20 digits. Visualization, if you make a story versus just remembering everything individually, it's a lot easier. And the mnemonics, such as my very educated mother served nachos. That's the list of the planets in order from the sun. That's something that I learned from one of my students. Or every good boy deserves fudge, for those of you that are musicians. And grocery list. If you categorize it, it's a lot easier to remember. Okay, we're just gonna have to. Okay, I'll just manually do this. Okay. And then in terms of compensatory strategies, there's also the adaptive approach. So not all clients can learn those compensatory strategies that I was just talking about. In fact, Kit Malia, the specialist in Britain who works with individuals with brain injury, talked about how it could take almost 200 hours for an individual with a brain injury to learn a strategy, which I think is, that's pretty scary. And so there's the adaptive approach in terms of going into the person's home and helping to organize the environment. So I'd like to ask you, what is the optimal learning environment for you and how do you learn best? I'm going to show you a list of items. Pretend it's your first day of work, you're at a new facility. I'm going to give you 1 minute to look at these items. There's a real test, which you look at these things for 1 minute. Actually, we'll make it 10 seconds. So it's going to be a very quick minute. Okay. So let's see. How many things do you think you could remember? And what strategy did you what strategy did you use to remember those items? Interesting. Cup of tea here. That's another strategy. Stay hydrated, and then my brain works better. Wow, categorization. Okay. Anyone under 30 who might have used their phone and inputted it in it? Yeah, okay. Great, categorization. That's what a lot of the teachers say, that's one of the most useful ways for remembering new information. Okay, so now let's look at mindfulness. And I think Marie Schaaf, you're in the audience, so you're also the mindfulness queen. If there's anything you want to add during the discussion, please do. So what is mindfulness? I think most people would know what it is now because it's become so mainstream, but it really did start as a Buddhism practice. And then Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who's actually a molecular biologist, westernized it. So it's paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Oh, you wanted to see the list again? Sorry. Okay. Okay. I'm sure everybody got 100%. I'm sure this is a very smart group. Okay, and if you were mindful, it would have been easier to remember that information. Okay, so mindfulness, go to the next slide. I'd like to have everybody listen to this link that Sue Gary's had sent, our education person.
Go ahead with the video.
Yeah, yes, please.
5 minutes.
So we should just alert you that this video is about 5 minutes long.
Since you're watching this video, I'll bet you want to meditate, but don't have time. Maybe you've tried to meditate, but had some trouble. Maybe you had a wonderful experience meditating over there, but just can't find that same feeling over here. Well, my name is Marty Borison, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to the technique of one-moment meditation. Then you can meditate whenever you need to. like when you're feeling stressed, or feeling angry. Maybe you're having trouble sleeping, or you're feeling anxious. Or you just need a new idea. Although one-moment meditation is ultimately about meditating in a moment, we're going to start with a minute. We start with a minute because a moment goes by so quickly that it's very hard to notice. But a minute is like a moment with handles on it. You know where it begins and where it ends, so it's easier to grasp. If you're ready, we'll do the basic minute now. You might want to shut the door, or at least tell people you're not available for the next minute. You don't have to tie yourself in knots for this. Just sit with your legs planted firmly on the floor. Try to sit up straight, but don't be rigid. It's as if your head were being lifted up away from the weight of the world. Think of it as cosmic traction. Now put your hands in any position that's balanced, symmetrical, and still. Like this, like this, or like this. During the minute, simply focus on your breathing, moment by moment. Of course, even in the space of a minute, you will get distracted. That's perfectly normal. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. But as soon as you notice that you're distracted, just think, and bring your mind back to your breathing. I'll ring a bell so you know when to start and when to finish. Ready? Then close your eyes. Oh, one more thing. It's okay to smile. And go. As you open your eyes, notice how you feel right now. Maybe a little bit refreshed, a little bit more awake, a little bit more open-minded. Not bad for a minute. And the more you do it, the better it gets. But please don't ever do the basic minute for longer than a minute. Don't be macho about it. Because the point of the basic minute is to show you that you can make a meaningful change in your state of mind quickly. So if you do it for longer, you're cheating. With one-moment meditation, you can also learn how to do the portable minute, which is very useful when you're standing in line, on a train, or stuck in a boring meeting. You can also learn the bonus minute, the surprise minute, and the emergency minute. With one-moment meditation, you can also learn how to reduce the length of the basic minute step by step until it only takes a moment. And when you can meditate in a moment, your whole day can be filled with meditation because it takes no time at all.
So what did you think about that? What did you think, Regina?
I really relaxed. I thought it was, I actually love the graphics and I think it's really simple but very cute. So I'm impressed with how they could convey a message so easily. Yeah, no, I really like it.
In our brain fitness classes, this is one of the favorite videos that our clients really like. And I agree. And I actually was practicing it. I wasn't looking at my notes ahead of time. Okay. So let's look at what's actually happening in the brain with mindfulness. Okay. Just look at the neurology behind it. What's interesting is they've been doing a lot more scans, looking at people, scans of people who meditate regularly. In fact, the Dalai Lama very kindly had quite a few of his monks come to University of Massachusetts, where the mindfulness started in terms of the westernized version. And they scan their brains, and I believe the psychologist's name is Dr. Richard Davidson, or actually David Richardson. And anyways, they found that the hippocampuses were a lot larger. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to be doing mindfulness, many hours a day like the monks. They also scanned brains of individuals who were even doing a half an hour a day or 15 minutes of the day. And they saw that there was activation in the left prefrontal cortex, and that's where your positive emotions are regulated. And it's interesting in people who are depressed, that area is activated less. This slide is actually, I have to thank Dr. Zun Vo, who is the pediatrician over at Children's Hospital, who runs a mindfulness group, a resiliency mindfulness group for adolescents. He and the psychiatrist, Dr. Jake Locke. And so I have to attribute this slide to him. So definitely there have been changes in terms of the neural pathways are more activated and increased densities in the gray matter in the hippocampus, which is the area involved for memory and learning. Increased functional connectivity, I should practice that word a few times. It basically showed a thicker and faster transmission of chemicals going through there. Okay. And in terms of the practicalness of mindfulness, many of our clients, when they come to our group for the first time, are feeling hyper aroused. They're feeling pretty nervous. And so the mindfulness is something that we start off with every group, because you need to be in your optimal calm state before you can actually learn new information. So we know that mindfulness helps us become present, teaches us to respond in a situation of conflict versus reacting, and managing stress. So I'd like to introduce COG Rehab and Community Mental Health. And what we were realizing is that it wasn't being standardized. We had family members and mental health consumers asking, why can't we have this in our mental health team? And so as a group, we decided we should develop a curriculum, standardize it, base it on research, and then have it accessible to everybody. And so these are teaching modules and PowerPoints that we created and spearheaded by Kristen Legrand. And then we introduced the materials at a conference, the CAO2 conference in June, as well as the Rehab Expo at UBC this fall. Oops. Okay. So currently, the cognitive rehab groups, we run a brain fitness group with Community Link a couple years ago, and then there's what we call Smart Brains. It's a great name that Kristen came up, in which clients identify areas of cognition that affect their being able to go to work or go to school or take care of their children. And it wasn't cognitive remediation with using the computer, except for one group that we ran, but it was primarily psychoeducation on the brain, which we find that's a cognitive strategy in itself. I understand there's been Smart Brains now run at KITS as well as Midtown. So new initiatives, I mentioned earlier about the research that's being done with Gastown Vocational Services and the EPI program. And then the COG Connect group is this trial of cognitive remediation. It's a pilot that Carolyn and I are going to start in April for young mental health consumers. I just want to show you what this curriculum looks like. And this is, for those that are in Vancouver Coastal Health, it is on the intranet, so you have access to it. How to be your own brain fitness coach. I guess I'd run about 6 of these Smart Brains groups in the last few years, and then I realized it really needs to be, the client needs to become the coach in terms of not outsourcing your brain to other people, but being responsible for your own brain. And so Sharp Brains is it's kind of a cool marketing site. They actually track, I think, marketing trends in cognitive rehab, cognitive remediation. It's based in the States, but I love this jigsaw because it talks about we first need to understand how your brain works. Like you have to understand where to put gas in your car before you can drive the car. And then the basics, things that we can be responsible for, such as healthy nutrition, and that's part of our courses that we do teach about antioxidants, aerobic exercise, because whatever is good for the heart is actually good for the brain. And then stress management, you can't learn if you're feeling stressed. And then the mental stimulation is the smart brains part. And then we talk about cross-training your brain in terms of mindfulness and then cognitive reframing so that you have a more positive default. The biofeedback, I think, would be really cool. We don't have the money for that, but apparently you can get biofeedback devices on your computer which monitors your heart rate, and you can teach your heart rate to go down.
I have a question about that, Patricia.
Sure.
So because it's relevant.
Okay, that's a really good question, Patricia. Are you in BC, like Viha or the interior? Interior health. Okay. That's a really good question. I can't answer that, but I could certainly ask. I guess I could ask whoever's in charge of that, and it would be shared. I think that would be wonderful. So I think we can get back to you later, or maybe that could be posted online, because essentially we did create it. A few of us from the COG group created it, but we don't own it anymore. It's now part of Vancouver Coastal Health. So I would have to ask, I guess, whoever our current manager is.
And if we can have it, then.
And if we can have it, it'll be posted on this site. Okay. And then I guess Leslie Anderson had asked, would this follow into self-hypnosis? To be honest, I don't know. I don't know anything about that or the research behind it. But that's a really good question. Okay. So let's look at the 4 pillars for brain health. We just talked about it earlier in terms of the nutrition, the stress management, physical exercise, and the mental stimulation. The first 3 are considered cognitive strategies for people with brain injury as well as people with mental illness, as all of us. And I think a lot of our clients, what they've said in their feedback forms, that they really enjoyed that part. They really appreciated it because they realized that this is something that they could do on their own, that they didn't need to come to classes for. They enjoyed the classes, but they thought, well, this is something I can continue. Okay, so here's an example of a Smart Brain session 3 on memory. And I'm just going to go through these slides fairly quickly. We always start off with a mindfulness exercise, and I've done some short body scans with clients. I've done breathing, where see if you can do this breathing so that nobody can hear you because it shows greater control of your breath. When you do the 4 breaths in, hold it, pause, then you pause, and then you do more breaths. Okay, great. Just show how much time I have. And then I've also I use my iPhone, and I've got some apps on it, such as MNF, so capital M, little n, capital F. This is a wonderful mindfulness app that we were given a list of apps from the Australia, I guess he's like the chief psychologist in mental health with youth. And that was, I think, one of the most favorite apps was MNF, as well as Headspace. And Headspace is fantastic. That is one that's done by a former monk in Britain, Andy Puddicombe. If you could ever Google him, TED Talks. He does a wonderful TED Talks. And our adult clientele loved his app. The first 10 are free. And then one other one, if you're working for young people, such as Julia, is Take a Chill. And that's something that Dr. Bo and Dr. Locke found really useful with adolescents. And it's interesting, on Children's Hospital website, they talk about that as being one of the coolest apps. Okay. So we do a check-in because, you come to this group, but it doesn't really make a difference unless you're, trying out these different strategies. And so every week clients do set a goal, a SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And then we check in with each other to see how that goal went. And then they set a goal at the end of the session as well. Okay. This slide I'm going to attribute to my colleague Robin Littleford, who is a provincial resource teacher. She's a specialist in brain injury, and the whole learning process is really interesting. All these modules are based on learning, and so before you learn, you have to be able to pay attention. And then I think it's interesting for clients to see what happens after the information's inputted. It goes from short-term to long-term, but only if you are rehearsing that information and consolidating it. Okay. Now I want to try something with you. Can you remember these letters? Anybody remember any of those letters? No, you don't have to do a poll here, Matt. I'm just going to go by slides where Matt's thinking, this is not the script. It's a whole other script here. Okay. Okay. Can anyone remember those letters? I personally can't. I'm really terrible with that kind of thing. What about this list? Can you remember these letters? Oh, looks like some people did remember those letters. Way to go, Nettie and Jinder. Okay. Can you remember these letters? I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Okay. You're probably recognizing there's a trend here. How about this one? And this one? I should have actually typed, how is this webinar? Okay, so what's interesting is that it's, and this is just an analogy for our clients, is that it's, or not an analogy, but it proves that whatever is more meaningful, you'll be able to remember. I can remember the birth dates of my kids and their friends, but I can't remember origin insertions of hand muscles, for instance, something that I learned quite a few years ago. So it has to be meaningful. Okay, memory boosters. Now, this is good for all of us. And I think throughout the classes that we teach with our clientele, as we talk about that this is good for all of us. So I really try to normalize it. I actually even don't like, I don't like the word normal, actually, but this is good for all of us. So regular physical activity, the physical medicine doctors at GF Strong on my other work site have talked about how 30 minutes a day, that's all you need, and you can break it up. But it's not slow walking, because some of our clients have said, well, how about if I just walk to the team? But I like to take my time. I like to look at the windows. We talk about, no, you actually have to make it so that your heart rate's going up and that you're breathing a little heavier, okay? Just a little heavier. And then stress reduction techniques such as the mindfulness and the progressive muscle relaxation. And again, whatever's good for the heart is good for the brain. Okay, memory strategies. Without opening your wallet, I want you to draw a $10 bill. I'm assuming everybody's doing this, right? Matt, are you doing this? No, you're looking at your iPhone. You're busted. Okay, so draw a $10 bill. I don't even know if this is legal because it's a real $10 bill I took a picture of. Shouldn't even be saying this. This is going to be on your site.
It's an old one.
So it's an old $10 bill. So what I want you to do now is I want you to look at the picture. Oh, Matt got the US $10 bill. Okay. What I want you to do is to look at this for a few seconds. Just look at either the top image or the bottom image. Now you have the intent to learn. I want you to try to remember the details and then try again, okay? Okay, Matt, are you looking at this now? Okay, now try again. He's looking at his iPhone again. Okay, now try, Matt. Let's just see if he's got more details. I'm guessing everybody works here really fast. Okay, did you get more details? Everybody should, because there was an intent to learn.
Squiggles. We got squiggles.
We got squiggles, okay. There was purposeful learning happening at first. Now, teaching compensatory strategies. Again, Alice Medallia, if you Google anything by her, she's brilliant. These are teaching tools that she recommends. First of all, it's just learning about your own thinking style and being able to monitor your thinking. Active use of information. With our groups, we make it as interactive as possible because that's how people best learn, using a multisensory approach. Again, with our groups, we do paper pencil activities, we use videos, YouTube clips, sometimes we do some physical stuff. Any way to get that information in. And then learning styles. This is especially interesting for clients. There's a reason why we run our groups in the afternoon, because of medications. Clients talk about how tired they are in the morning. Some clients talk about how they're better at hearing things. Some clients talk about, well, it's better if you give me a handout of the PowerPoints. And so we do all three: auditory, visual, and tactile. And then organizational style. Some people like to look at the big picture first. Other people like to work at each detail at a time. And then social learning style. I have had there's some clients that have quite severe social anxiety, and so a group situation is too scary. So that's fine. I'll meet one-on-one with them. I've even met with clients at Starbucks because they didn't want to come to the team, and worked on some of these strategies. Okay, now we're going to see if you've consolidated some of this information. There's a case study here. Okay. Brody is a 21-year-old man with 1 year of college education. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 18 during his first year of university. He lives in the basement suite of his parents' home. Now, the parents notice that he has difficulty getting up in the morning. He doesn't seem motivated to take care of himself. He forgets his appointments at the epi team. He needs reminders to take his medications, and he seems forgetful, speaks very little. But on the other hand, he's also aware that he's not thinking as well as he did before his illness began. So an OT cognitive screen showed difficulties with verbal and visual memory and some executive functioning. Brody's identified that he'd like to improve his cognition and not rely on his parents. He would like to get out of the house and perhaps go to the gym or ride his bike. He also wonders about going to school, but he's not sure what to take. So I'm just wondering, I'm going to ask you a question, but you'll want to refer to the case study. Okay, so the first one, I don't know if you want to write this down. I'm hoping you're gonna do this. So name 2 strategies or recommendations for memory that will help Brody improve his functional, social, and occupational performance. Patricia said you left out kinesthetic. Oh, okay, that actually, I meant tactile for that. Good point. Okay, so let's go back to the case study. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Go
yeah.
ahead.
Back to this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's not taking.
So just going back to the case study again. Okay. So 2 strategies or recommendations. And I see some people have written a few. Okay. Oh. Okay. Schedule, categorization, reminders on phone. Those are really excellent. Okay. And there's more. Okay. Excellent. Thanks so much for participating. I know it's kind of hard just doing it via computer. Is this going to open up the settings? Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. You know what? There's still answers coming in, so.
6 to 14, so we need to scroll it down. Clock alert.
Okay. Okay, and Leanna, we're going to make sure we'll get to your question at the end.
There we go. Calendars, post-it notes, meditation.
Wow, that's great. Okay. Thank you.
Hey.
That's excellent.
Put on the fridge.
Okay. So these are just some suggestions. Oops, just find that cursor again. So some suggestions, and I think some people talked about the schedule, working with Brody to do a schedule with check-off lists for each day. And this is something that Dr. Medali had suggested as well with her clients. Now, to choose only one calendar or day timer. I've had clients where they've had whiteboard, day planner, they've used their phone, and then they've forgotten where they put their information. So just consider using one calendar, and within the home, that is. And then, of course, if you want to put things on the phone, that's a great idea. And then what would be important if you're first working with Brody is to see if you can review his schedule in the morning and in the evening. You can either do a telephone call and just say, hey, just wondered if you had a chance to check your schedule, and then at the end of the day, or else have his parents do it at the end of the day, whichever he prefers. Okay, so the next question is, how would you teach those strategies in light of what we've just been discussing? So if you could post as well, that would be great. Okay. And this is harder because it's obviously more than a 1 or 2 word answer. Demonstrate. Some people have said, can everybody see these answers? Oh, excellent. Okay. I like that. Find out clients' preferred learning style. That's great. And have Brody write it out himself. Did someone read this, see these PowerPoints ahead of time? Okay, that's Maybe. Brilliant. So that's what we do say is what would Brody generate it? What could he generate? Let's just take a look. First of all, this was kind of a trick question. Before strategy training, consider what was Brody's readiness for change and his motivation to learn the new skills. And then begin by identifying what Brody can do and what he wants to do. It has to be goal-driven for sure. Principles of adult learning, it's got to be practical and direct, learn by doing, using prior experience. What's worked with you? Ask Brody, what has worked in the past? Excuse me, just gotten over a cold. And teaching in an informal situation, involving Brody in the process. And I noticed somebody earlier on had written, see what Brody can generate. Another thing is I would do with Brody is, first of all, again, tell him, reinforce that everybody uses compensatory strategies. His parents do, I'm sure. And what are his beliefs about using strategies? I've had some clients not be too keen because they weren't sure it was going to make a difference. So again, for those of you with motivational interviewing skills, this would be very helpful. And definitely have Brody generate the strategy if possible. That would be my first. And then when we're teaching the strategy, make it in an environment that's easy to learn. So to reduce that, the strategies, make sure you have the client's attention. And then repetition, consistency, and structure. Those 3 are very important. Direct instructional approach, of course, is demonstrating it, modeling it, having him try it, and then repeating it. Okay. Family members want to be involved, so what can they do to help Brody improve his memory so that he becomes more independent and less reliant on them? I wonder if Matt, if you would mind now typing out that question. So what can family members do to help Brody improve his memory so that he becomes more independent? Okay.
If you're going to leave that slide up.
Sure, okay. And this is remembering that Brody wants to be more independent. The family members want him to remember his appointments. He wants to go to the gym and ride his bike. Maybe do a class. Again and again. Okay, thank you. Thanks for having the courage to write out an answer here. Go to the gym with them. That's excellent. Encourage and congratulate. Wonderful. Okay. Great. Definitely all family and client driven here. That's wonderful. Okay. I know it seems simplistic, right? But believe it or not, a lot of people don't use these strategies. Just think about yourself if you've got kids, how we know how best to, well, know best. We know how to teach a child or to be more patient, but if you're feeling kind of stressed out that day, it's hard to be that best optimal parent that you can be. So for family members to help Brody, ask Brody instead of telling him what to do. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Now, these are some, oh, we've lost our,
We'll come back.
Okay. Okay, just going to go into our next slide. Regina is going to be the IT person here. There, thank you. Regina and Matt are like the most mindful IT people ever. Oh, Just a second, sorry. So some suggestions. So family members can repeat instructions when asked, and that qualifier is when asked, because it can be irritating if someone repeats things to you when you think you've already heard it. Turn off any distractors. This one is interesting. I wrote this down because this is something else Medallion suggested, asking Rhodey to repeat or paraphrase. I personally am not sure I would use that strategy because I think it could be irritating. I myself have teenage sons. I'm not sure they'd like it if I did that. Put things in writing. I think that's really helpful. And then review things in a consistent manner. The calendar on the fridge. And I think a big thing is just reminding him of his goals. I have a young person who's 20 years old who is quite affected by cognition and his other symptoms. And his father is wonderful. He is always reminding him, hey, so remember, you want to be able to do this during the summer, so we need to do this first. And always relating it to the individual's goals. And that they're fun goals as well. Okay. So I feel like I've rushed through a lot of information, but are there any questions?
Maybe we can just begin to answer some of the questions that I noticed. I apologize if I lost any along the way, but I know Patricia had a question asking if there was any research that looks at aerobic exercise and cognition. So just wondering if we have anything to say about that.
I actually have some. Sorry, I keep bringing my face forward. Embarrassing. I do have some references at the end of the PowerPoints, and hopefully let's just go through here. It all, oops, sorry. Okay, so this is terrible, but I can't read this very well. It's such small print. I can zoom in a bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. In terms of exercise per se, I don't think I have it specifically on here, but I do have references at home on my home computer. So Patricia, or whoever asked that question, I wonder if you could just email your, would you email your email address? Email your email address? Or Matt would know it. I'm not actually sure. Put it up right here. Was it Patricia who asked that question?
Yeah, I believe it was Patricia Parker.
Patricia Parker, okay.
Okay, great, thank you. We had another question about if you know of any research with older adults, and that question came from Linda.
Okay, Linda, that's a great question, and I don't know if Stacy Kalmick is logged in. She's with the older adult program, and she started a brain fitness group with older adults. So I know I did a presentation for them, and I found there wasn't as much research for that group for those that were 65 and above. But Stacy, if you're online here, I wonder if you're familiar with any research. If you are, can you type it in? If not, I think I wonder if some of these questions, Matt, if we could get, I could look up the information and then they could be posted on later on. Cognitive remediation without the expensive technology, that would be the paper and pencil, and more research is being done on the computerized approach. But with paper and pencil, if you're looking for resources, Kit Malia has a kit called Brainwave, and I think it's a few $100s. But they use it at GF Strong a lot with the clients with brain injury. And when he did his workshop here a few years ago, he said it would be applicable for individuals with mental illness as well. So this Brainwave kit is basically several manuals, one manual specifically for memory, one for attention, executive functioning, information processing. It's also got a great section on explaining how the brain works. And so I think there's been a couple of different mental health teams that have purchased it, as well as the EPI program. But that's another way that's the non-computerized way. There's also Lumosity, which is pretty inexpensive. You can have free trials. And I think it's like $79 a year. You could buy it for your site. Now, they've done more research with people, I think, of various ages and not specific for people with mental illness. But I know one of our Smart Brains group, what we did was we made it service-wide across Vancouver, and that people that attended, they were introduced to Lumosity and that they were given a free membership for 6 months. So there's been lots more research using Lumosity. I think at least they keep sending me information because I bought a year subscription to use with my clients. But that's something that you could try. Again, no hardcore evidence yet. But like everything else, it's emerging, and I've had clients talk about how they actually quite enjoyed using it. And they felt it gave them hope that they were able to do the exercises. So there's that effect as well.
Many questions coming in, people. So I'm going to do my best to just capture some of them. I did see a question from Rebecca a little while ago who said, when is your cognitive group starting?
Okay.
I'm not sure if you can.
Sure. The Cog Connect group starts in mid-April. We haven't even sent out a poster. It's for clients in the Vancouver Coastal Health area and for individuals with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder who are 19 to 30 years of age.
Thank you. Mitra has another question. I apologize if I'm not saying that correctly. If there's a resource for a young child with FA,
fetal alcohol syndrome,
I expect that's probably, yeah, it might just be a little typo, that has poor executive thinking.
Okay.
I think there's some thinking going on here.
Yeah, yeah, it's right. It's actually, I keep, when I'm not looking at the computer, I realize, oh, that shows me thinking. I don't know if anything per se. At Sunny Hill Hospital, Sunny Hill Health Center for Children, they have I believe, autism program, and they have, I think, maybe I'm wrong here, a program for children with fetal alcohol syndrome, but the developmental pediatricians there and the staff at Sunny Hill might be able to help you more with that because they work with the younger population. So yeah, Sunny Hill or even Children's Hospital, the psychology department, you could ask them. I know of children who don't have that, but who also have poor executive thinking, who've tried, for instance, CogPack. I'm thinking of a young girl in particular who's 10 or 11 years old who was tried CogPack with a private psychologist, but her mother wasn't sure that it transferred into being able to manage and to think and to plan and to use judgment in the classroom. So again, I just don't know what the evidence is. So sorry, I'm not more help there. But try Sunny Hill or Children's Hospital. The psychologist there. Sorry. Leanna's question was.
I don't see Leanna's question.
I might just scroll.
Would Kathy welcome emails for specific questions, aka please put your email address up.
Okay. I think this is tricky. I think it's okay. It's funny. I'm 3 days a week at GF Strong, and I work with primarily teenagers with brain injury, and I'm 2 days a week in the mental health team. So I might not be able to get back to you right away. Just, but sure, put my email. What the heck?
But actually, what we might be able to do too,
or maybe
is
if we send to the website.
If it can get sent to the website, then maybe I can filter them and then ask you all together, and that might be an easier way
super.
to. And how would we communicate back out? We could just maybe do a little question and answer sheet and post it on the site. Could we do that? And that way we don't have to ask you 50 million individual questions, but we can just do a bit of a summary. Would that be
I would
easier,
really appreciate that.
Okay.
I would actually really appreciate that because I get a lot of emails, and I know it's the whole work-life balance. I quite often answer them at night. I don't want to. Okay. So
that's our commitment to you. That I saw there was a note about, can we please put resources up? So maybe I'll work with you around that. We'll develop a list, and then over the next week or so, if anybody has additional questions, maybe they can send them to the website, and I will filter through. I will talk with Kathy, and I appreciate your willingness to follow up on that. And we'll do it in a one-shot deal, and then I can just.
Sure, that would be appreciated.
Okay. Webinar number 2.
All right. All right.
Thank you so much for your patience, by the way. I'm sorry if my face kept going in and out, making you feel dizzy.
So I realize that it is 4:25. We could probably take one last question. We're really impressed that you're still on the webinar at this point. So thank you very much. I don't see anybody else typing. I don't think. Do I? Okay, give it one more second. No, maybe not.
Wonderful presentation.
Okay.
Okay, thanks so much for your patience.
So it is my great pleasure again to say a very big thank you to you, Kathy. She's going to Hugh. I know it's been a tremendous amount of effort for you to pull this together to just,
in 2 weeks too,
in
right?
2 weeks. You had a very short timeline to do this. So we are grateful, and on behalf of British Columbia's Advanced Practice, just want to say thank you, Kathy, for your volunteer time and all your hard work. So thanks very much, Kathy. We really appreciate the learning opportunity. And thanks to Matt, of course, for he's here, and Jordan, who's online as well, and to all of you who are still on the line and who were on the line. We're just so impressed that 190 people wanted to come play with us this afternoon. So we hope to see you soon on the 27th. Thank you kindly.
Thanks
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.